nobody wants to take accountability for themselves. They want you to be accountable. That's the type of accountability that we see a lot, especially in these podcasting spaces, all these different people with microphones. Okay, I got a microphone too, so that's why I always make it an effort. If something applies to me, I fall first on my sword to let you guys know what's up. A lot of times what you'll see is that people will get on here, talk about accountability this, accountability that, whole time they absolutely never want to hold themselves accountable. And I'm here to tell you, if you are one of those people that really values accountability, guess who you're going to start with? You. Because you're the one who has to be accountable for yourself. We can get out here all day long telling everybody and their mama to be accountable, but guess what? You can't force those people to do so. Yes, we can shame, and I'm a firm believer in shame, okay? Shame. Bring shame back. I believe if we really want to see change happen, we need to start with ourselves. Because I can't change you, okay? I can't change the next person. Maybe I can inspire, but how do we even go about doing that? We go about doing that by modeling the behavior that we want to see. In my videos, whenever I have the opportunity to, I will throw myself on the sword. If something applies to me, I make sure I'm very vocal about it. Give you some examples. I want to stop cursing. I heard my daughter, she dropped the S-bomb, and I was like, oh no. And what's crazy is, I wanted to say, oh, to her saying, I was like, we all have things that we can be working on. No person is perfect. And it's not that we have to be hateful of ourselves because we're not perfect. Absolutely not. If we're constantly trying to run from our imperfections, what that's going to look like is you hyper-focusing on what everybody else has to say or focusing on what everybody else has to do rather than looking in the mirror and saying, hey, what can I do to be better? A lot of folks don't want to do that. And I attribute this to a lot of different factors. And I want to make sure I preface this. Just because I say that things influence behavior does not take away from accountability. We can understand where these things come from, what has facilitated these behaviors without completely removing accountability. And it gets so annoying whenever I'm having these conversations and I try to talk about how these behaviors are influenced and they're like, well, no, you can't, stop blaming. It's like, it's not about blaming anybody. It's about understanding. It's like, people don't just wake up one day and just are what they are. No. We're a product of our experiences. We're a product of the propaganda that we've, witnessed. We're a product of, the people around us. Just because we talk about how these behaviors have been influenced does not mean that we're scapegoating accountability. That's where a lot of people get messed up. They think because you talk about what influenced the behavior that you're scapegoating it. No, I can recognize that the influence is there and still recognize that you have choice. And with the way society is now, with the internet and all the access to information, people can start to become more enlightened, grow in ways that they've never been able to grow before. A lot of the information was behind a paywall. And so not everybody had access to everything. But we live in a day and age now where you can literally learn how to build a car off of YouTube. With all this access to information, that puts the ball in our court. If we have different problems, if we're struggling with different things, if we're trying to unlearn certain behaviors and learn new behaviors, we have the great wide web to literally find out ways to do that. Step-by-step tutorials, testimonials, people who are actually going through it and then sharing their journey. We have so much information out there that it is a choice. Okay, it is a choice to be stupid. It is a choice to be stagnant. It is a choice to be stuck in your ways, stuck in your own mind. The ball is in our court. But a lot of people don't want to do that. A lot of people want to keep pushing the ball into other people's court. They understand that there are problems, but they don't want to acknowledge that sometimes they are the problem. And as much as we want to point the finger at everybody else, At some point in time, we got to look in that damn mirror. That's where we really need to head towards. Looking at ourselves, being accountable to ourselves, and then being open. That's another part of it. People who suffer from accountabiliphobia also suffer from being closed-minded. They don't want to hear anything. They don't want to hear any criticism. And I think this stems from, this is what I was trying to get to earlier. I think a lot of this stems from this all or nothing kind of mentality that we've been ingrained in since we were going to school. When you go to school, they literally teach you how to be a good slave. It's either this or that. You're either right or wrong. And that's it. It's always this binary, except for the things that truly are binary. We always get caught up in this binary process of you're either right or wrong. When we're growing up in an environment like that, it trains you to never want to be wrong, because we associate being wrong with, oh, like, that's just so terrible. It's just so terrible to be wrong. While some people will go back and correct the wrong information that they have and try to learn and do better, other people shut down and then they just close off to it altogether. They don't want to feel wrong, so they will literally grift so hard in a conversation. I know you guys have experienced this. You're talking to someone and you tell them a hard fact that is irrefutably true, and they will continue to grift so hard on it because they just cannot admit. They refuse to admit that they are wrong. They won't concede, because conceding, since they've been taught, is a sign of weakness. It's a sign of lesser than, rather than, oh, this just means I've learned something new. This just means I've been exposed to information that I didn't have previously. We need to be open-minded. That is the first step to being accountable. When people try to tell me about myself, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what's being said and I'm going to really try to evaluate it, instead of just dismissing it immediately. Like, obviously there's some things I can dismiss right away because it's like nonsense. But when something is legit, I'm like, okay, that's very interesting. That's an interesting take on me. You want to investigate that a little bit. Think about it. Is there anything valid about what's being said? Because sometimes what you'll find when people are giving criticism or giving critique, maybe there's parts of it that you can agree with and parts of it that just does not apply. That comes from having discernment, being able to be open-minded to the information and then discerning what is valid and what is not. But you can't get to that point if you're closed-minded. The most closed-minded individuals I've ever ran into were the ones screaming about accountability the most. That's the ironic part. You would have somebody that they're going in on everybody, but then you tell them one thing about themselves and they shut down. They crash the fuck out. They lose their effing minds because they can't handle the idea that this persona that they've built up about themselves is flawed. That directly comes from this need to always be right. That's one of the pillars of, like, I forget who said that. I think it was maybe Kevin Samuels, the need to be right. I forget what acronym that comes from. Not every criticism is an attack. Oftentimes it may feel that way, but if we want to be accountable individuals, not everything is an attack. Thank you, Rome King. Sign language. We oftentimes get it messed up thinking being accountable means holding other people accountable, but no. Being accountable means looking in that mirror. That's what it means. It means to look in that mirror and see, where can I be better? My spidey senses always tingle when I'm listening to somebody and they never address anything about themselves that they're working on. They never address anything about themselves that they want to be better. It's always everybody else. And then not giving any grace or nuance to other people's experiences. That's the part. Because when you're accountable to yourself, it shows in how you analyze other people's situations. Because if I'm just never holding myself accountable and I can't understand how people struggle with different things, how people can be in one place in their life and then eventually get out of that place or anything like that, if I just can't understand that, then of course, when I'm analyzing somebody else's situation, I can't be nuanced in my analysis. I can't look at them and be like, okay, look, I understand you're a product of this, or you said this, and it makes sense why you feel this way. However, and then go into the critique. If you are just sitting here and you just see, oh, well, you should just be better. Well, you should just, like, as if it's easy. Anyone who has gone through changes in life and has had to work to be a better person understands it's not It is not easy, okay? It is not easy to grow. It is not easy to confront your lowest denominator of yourself. That is hard. Everyone shits on Disney, and I get it. I'm not the biggest fan of Disney at all, but Inside Out is one of the series I think should be mandatory for every child, adult, elderly, everybody. Everybody needs to watch that movie because a lot of us don't understand our emotions. A lot of us don't understand different things come into play. And when you get to a point where you can start thinking about yourself and why you feel the things that you feel and understanding your experiences and coming to terms with the fact that you're not perfect, that's what the whole second movie was about. Coming to terms with the fact that you're a flawed individual. A lot of people can't get to that. And it shows up in how they treat other people. It shows up, especially, like I said, if we're watching different podcasters or, people that are content creators, it'll show up in how they talk about other people's issues. So that's why I gravitate towards people that are nuanced. I like listening to perspectives that are balanced, okay? We don't just sit over here and pile on people. We look at the situation and we analyze it for what it is. We understand the ups and the downs, all of that. But the moment you get on here and you make it seem like it's just so easy to be a perfect individual, one, you're delusional. Two, you probably have a lot of skeletons in your closet, and the reason why you're hyper fixated on everybody else without understanding their situation or being nuanced or even, falling on the sword whenever you need to, the reason why you're doing that is probably because you got a lot of you trying to hide. Hey, it's like sleight of hand. Look over there so you're not seeing what's over here. That's what I've been finding since I've been on these YouTube streets and I've been perusing these different channels. The channels that I stopped watching, it usually comes out later on that they've been in some mess. And it makes sense with how they treat other people. When I say accountability starts with yourself, that's what it is. Everybody getting out here saying, be accountable, be accountable, be accountable, but they're never holding themselves accountable. They don't understand the term. They think it's supposed to be, something that you use offensively just to attack people. Well, you should be accountable. Just something you just throw to everybody else. But it's like, no, accountability starts here. On some Michael Jackson, look at that man in the mirror. That's the person who we need to be starting with, working on ourselves. And through that, we can motivate and inspire other people to do the same. That's one of the things that I really hope to do while I'm out here doing YouTube for as long as I'm going to do it. Because I don't know if I'm going to do YouTube forever. I want to inspire other people to better themselves. Because I'm in the process of doing it too. Shit's hard. Okay, it is very hard. And I want to give flowers where flowers are due. Being with Justin opened my eyes to so much. I already knew I was a work in progress when I met him. I knew that I had things to work on. I didn't know how much I had to work on. That's why I love interacting with different people because, and this is why, your relationships, your close relationships and your real life IRL relationships are so important because if you're not really experiencing different people, they're not experiencing you, it's very hard to get a real look at who you are. Because you can't experience yourself. Somebody else, like if I'm going into a room and every room I go into and people have this perception of me and I'm like, well, I'm not like that. But then everybody else is saying, yeah, you are like that. If everybody else is saying, hey, maybe that means I need to look inward. But we need to understand that comes from they're able to experience you in a way that you will never, ever be able to experience yourself. As much as you want to, you cannot actually ever see your real face. That's something that drives a lot of people nuts. Okay, you look at the mirror it's an image. It's not 100% what you look like. That's the part that gets under a lot of people's skin. You're never gonna see your own face, like for real, the way other people are gonna see it. You're not gonna be able to experience yourself the same way other people will experience you, and vice versa to them. When I met Justin, I already knew I was a work in progress. I didn't know how much under construction I needed to be. Okay, when I tell you that man, he opened my eyes to so much, and it was in a loving way. Okay, he wasn't just sitting over here, well, you need to do that. Like, he wasn't doing all that. It was from a loving place. letting me know, like, hey, these are things that I've noticed. You know, you might want to think a little bit about this. We could talk about this. I am a much better woman after being with Justin, because he opened my eyes to a lot of different things that I was unaware of, completely unaware of. Because in our heart, we're always struggling with being a good person. You know, we all, unless you're crazy as hell, we're all struggling with this idea of ourselves. And it's always, the idea of ourselves is always like, I'm a good person. Like I said, you gotta watch Inside Out too. I'm a good person. That's what we keep telling ourselves. But it takes somebody to come in and be like, hey, but you did this, you did this, you did this, you did this. That doesn't quite speak to you're just a good person all around. It speaks to some flaws. And that's a human experience. We're all flawed. And that's okay. The problem sets in when you just completely want to ignore your problems, go out and believe that this idea of yourself is just, it's the end all be all, and just completely ignore. Put it to the back of your mind, anybody you've hurt, anytime that you were wrong in a situation, different behaviors and habits that you have that are destructive to not only yourself, but the people around you. We have to understand the people around us, the people closest to us. Granted, you don't want to be surrounded by a bunch of toxic individuals. You know, life isn't easy. I say these things, I'm not saying it's easy to do these things. I'm not saying that at all. Okay, that's the one thing people get messed up. Life is not easy. It was never meant to be easy. It's a lot easier given that we have all this technology, but then we have new problems that make it harder. So life is not easy. Everything that I'm saying is not easy, but anything worth having is worth fighting for. Anything worth having is worth putting effort into. So if you really care about yourself, you care about being a good person and being the best version of you that you can be, then it's gonna take some work. When you're around good, solid people, they're able to hold a mirror up to you and with love tell you about yourself. They're able to analyze you in ways that you will never be able to analyze for yourself, because like I said, you will never experience you the same way everybody else can. Just like you guys watching the stream. Like, I can go back and rewatch the stream, sure, but it's still gonna be skewed because I'm me. You know, the people around us can be our mirror, and they can really tell us about ourselves and help us be more accountable, but we have to be open to that information. And the more that we all collectively try to do that, try to be open to the idea that we're not perfect and that we have things we can work on, and not just shut the door on everybody that's trying to give us some information about how we could be better. If we collectively are more open-minded and have discernment, the world is going to be a much better place. Like, wholeheartedly, full stop, it's going to be a much, much better place.